Welcome to Shoot This Now, the podcast where every week we talk about stories that should be made into TV shows and movies. My name is Tim Malloy, and this week our guest is Karen Gillan, who you know from Jumanji, Guardians of the Galaxy Parts 1 and 2, Avengers, Infinity War, and now her debut as a writer-director, the excellent new The Party's Just Beginning. In the film, Gillan plays a young woman named Lucy, living in Gillan's own hometown in the Scottish Highlands, a place with a very big problem. That problem, and this is a good warning for anyone who wants to avoid these types of discussions of suicide, is a very high suicide rate, especially among men. The Party's Just Beginning handles it sensitively and empathetically. It's a very thoughtful movie, and one of those movies that feels deeper and more layered the more you think about it. As I went back and thought about certain characters' motivations, I found the story even better than when I was watching it, because I sort of peeled it back and realized where they were coming from and what they wanted, more than I understood as I first watched it. It's one of those movies that really stays with you. And the location is really kind of haunting too. Not in an unpleasant haunting kind of way, like a poltergeist haunting, but like a I wish I could go there and see that town kind of way. Gillan really knows her location, combining Scottish nightlife and rocky nature and suburban sameness into a cool mix of mist and neon. It seems like a very special, very unusual place. Sometimes we just use the hook of this podcast, which is, again, hey, here's a story that should be made into a movie, as an excuse to talk to someone cool. Or we get someone cool and then try to sort of sandwich in the hook of the podcast. But this week, when we asked Gillan if she had a story in mind that should be a film, she actually had two. And they were both totally unexpected and totally interesting. And one involves a witch. So I'm going to call this our Halloween episode. It sounds like the next time Gillan goes out writing and directing, she wants to get more into horror, which is kind of how she got started in all this. And that sounds pretty cool. If you like this episode, please give us 5 stars on iTunes, tell a friend, and follow us on Shoot This Now Pod. And of course, check out The Party's Just Beginning in theaters December 7th and digitally December 12th. Okay, I'm just going to talk and they'll edit together so that it will look professional, even if I sound like a clown who's just babbling.
That's great, because I'm definitely going to sound like a clown.
Perfect. So you've done really big movies, and now you're doing this very personal, very intimate movie at a totally different scale. Is there one that feels like a better fit or one that you like more?
In terms of like a bigger scale movie and a smaller one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough question, because, you know, I do like a small indie movie where you get to do a lot in a day. You can, it really feels like you're exercising the muscles, whether it's acting or directing or writing. And so I really enjoy that aspect. However, on a big movie, the craft service is pretty good, so I might have to go with that.
But you have to be in charge of everything. I mean, you're writing and directing this, and if there's an answer, you're the person who has the answer.
I know, there was a moment on my movie where I realized that I was that person, because people were like, what are we going to do? We don't have a solution. Yeah. Karen? Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm the person that needs to come up with a genius solution. Yeah. So I don't know if I did that, but I certainly said whatever I'd said with conviction.
Yeah. It seems like on a Jumanji or on a Guardians, you're kind of part of an important part, but part of a giant machine. And it's kind of like, just be here and wait.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it sort of depends, really. But yeah, there's a lot of like hurry up and wait to being on a big movie where, you know, it's a big rush to get ready and then you might sit around for 5 hours. Not so much on Jumanji, because like all of us were in all of the scenes. But on some other movies, it can definitely be like that. Yeah.
How did you decide on this for your first project? I mean, did you think, I want to make a movie, what can I find to write about? Or was this something that was kind of lurking for a long time?
I think where this came from was me just deciding that I wanted to write my own movie, because I was having such a good time as an actress, you know, portraying all of these amazing pieces of writing, but I wanted to portray one of my own. And so then I thought, okay, what do I want my first story to be about? And it just felt natural that it would be set in the place where I'm from. And then also at the same time, I had read this statistic that the suicide rates in the Highlands of Scotland, where I'm from, were significantly higher among young men than the rest of Scotland. Yeah. So then I was like, wow, this is such a strange contradiction, because it's such a beautiful, picturesque place to grow up. Yet we have this dark statistic looming over us, and I wanted to know why. And so the film is essentially just an exploration as to why that might be the case.
Yeah. I don't want to reveal too much about the movie because people should obviously go see it. But I think it's safe to say that the two main characters you kind of look at, who I guess are at risk, have kind of struggles with masculinity, in the sense of one is kind of trying to figure out, one is your gay best friend, your character's gay best friend, who's trying to figure out his place in the world and is kind of forced to be, doesn't want to be closeted, but other people are kind of forcing him to be closeted. And then I won't say too much about the other one because it comes kind of late in the movie.
Yeah.
But is that something that seems innate to Scotland or innate to mountains, or because you have kind of the same thing here, the highest suicide rates here being the United States, the highest suicide rates tend to be in mountain areas, tend to be men.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I don't think it's specific to Scotland. I think actually this story is universal. I think that it's probably specific to remote places that maybe feel a little secluded or cut off from the rest of the world. And I think that a lot of the times, we have this epidemic now where men don't feel like they can express themselves and they're not comfortable talking about their emotions quite in the same way as women are. And so I think that is a big contributing factor.
It's funny, though, because I remember reading interviews with you about this movie. Were you growing up, there just weren't that many female directors to look at, to model yourself
there wasn't.
on. So it's like, if men think they have it that hard, how much worse is it for women?
I mean, women certainly have it hard. I mean, I grew up and I genuinely thought of a director's job as a male's job. And I think it was probably because it was like an authoritative position, a position of power. And so I just didn't really have many examples. I've since kind of watched more films and realized that there are some examples, but clearly not enough. So I'm hoping that I can be one of those for a little girl growing up who is expressing or has a natural gift or talent for directing or has an interest, and maybe she will see that I've done it and go into it herself.
Is there something cultural happening in Scotland now? I mean, there's, especially with feminism, and I don't mean to ask only questions about like being a female director, but I'm a big fan of Churches, for instance. And do you know that band?
Oh yeah, I love that band.
Yeah, like she's amazing.
Oh, she is cool. Yeah.
And is totally just like breaking ground and is leading that group and sort of leading Scottish music. I don't want to go too far, but I think they're the biggest band out of Scotland right now. I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I've seen them perform in Los Angeles and they're incredible. Yeah. And she is just an incredible role model for young women. I mean, she's so powerful up there and just kind of leading the charge with that band, and she's amazing. Is there is there something going on with all of Scotland at this point? I mean, is there kind of a cultural moment?
I mean, I think that Scotland's experiencing what a lot of the rest of the world is. Yeah. I've actually been in the States. I haven't been back to Scotland in almost a year, and it's making me so sad because I'm so homesick. Just going to have a small weep. But no, I think that this movement is kind of happening all not all over the whole world, but certainly in many countries, which is good.
Yeah. Were you always a writer? Were you a writer before you were an actor? How did you?
No, I started off acting. That's always what I wanted to do. But I also used to make little horror movies in my house in Scotland, and so I was directing those as well. I mean, they were little films on my video camera, but it was kind of essentially the same thing as making a real movie.
Why horror?
Horror? I just loved it. I mean, those were the films that I watched growing up. I loved them so much, like all of the cheesy 90s horror films, like Teenagers, Process of Elimination, one dies one after the other.
So you probably saw Halloween.
I haven't seen the new one yet.
Oh. Get ready.
I'm so ready. I'm so ready.
It's good. It's really fun.
Is it?
It's like really fun.
Great.
They definitely know what they're doing.
Good. They should do by now.
It's so hard for anybody to write a script and break through, and so hard for anyone to direct. Do you feel like your success with the big movies has kind of gotten you the clout to do that? Like, was that a plan, or did it just happen to work out, or did it not help at all?
No, I mean, it helped so much. I mean, I've essentially been shadowing some of the biggest and best directors in our industry. And so I've just been picking things up the whole time over years, talking to all of the incredible DPs who work on all of these amazing films, asking them questions. So by the time it came to directing my own film, I felt like I had gathered so much knowledge from all of these amazing people in our industry. And I think that it probably did help in some way to get the funding for our movie, the fact that I was in these other movies.
Yeah.
And then it definitely helped with the finished product, for sure.
Yeah. How did you decide on your aesthetic? I mean, it seems like there's elements of other things that I've really liked. There's a little bit of 24-Hour Party People. There's a little bit
I haven't seen that.
Oh, okay. Then
I'll take that.
You might like it because I like both of these movies a lot. I feel like it's impossible to grow up there and not be influenced by Trainspotting.
Yes, definitely.
What was the aesthetic you were going for?
I don't think we ever sort of talked about a specific movie that it should look like. Where did that even come from? I actually started by showing the DP trailers to movies that I didn't want it to look like.
Nice.
I'm not naming any names. But no, those movies are amazing. But there was just a really obvious route to go down with this movie, which was indie, Sundance-y, handheld vibes,
right.
which I love so much, but I just didn't. I wanted to steer clear of that. And then we just talked about what lenses we liked and color palettes and what it actually. We started off with emotions of the character and what it feels like to grow up in Scotland, and then we sort of developed from there.
It's a really up movie, with the music and things like that, and with the pink titles at the beginning. But it feels like it's kind of, I'm using this to kind of stay above water. I'm kind of trying to stay amped with poppy music and stuff like that, so I don't fall into a depression. Is that?
I think, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, the character is doing exactly that with her partying, Yeah. If she really sat down and was just sort of alone with her thoughts for a second, then she would have to face all of this emotion that she's suppressing by partying and taking drugs and drinking too much.
Yeah. Man, I just really like the way you played that. I mean, I quit drinking 6 years ago and just totally relate to that sense of this is fun and then it's not fun. Mm-hmm. And I think you got that really well.
Oh, well, thanks. I hope so. I want it to feel authentic.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just consulting the notes.
The notes, yeah.
We do a podcast where we talk about stories that should be made into movies. Is there a story besides this one that you've just made, congratulations,
Thanks.
that you've always thought somebody needs to make that movie, someone needs to tell that story?
I've always thought, this is random, the Romanian Revolution.
The what?
The Romanian Revolution would make a great movie. I mean, just because it was. I mean, I say great. It would be a very hard to watch movie, but I think that's a story that I haven't really seen told cinematically.
I don't know anything about this.
Well, this is why I need to make the movie.
Yeah.
I'm not Romanian, though.
That's okay.
I studied it because we did this play in Scotland called Mad Forest, which is all about the Romanian Revolution.
Yeah. And
so we went to Romania and looked around and heard all these anecdotes of people who lived through it. And I always thought that would be, a story that would, really benefit from being told on screen.
Yeah.
So that could be cool. Or there's this witch, apparently the first witch is from Scotland or something like that.
I'm sold on First Witch. I would
first
see
ever witch.
And you have the horror background.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I could be a witch. I'm pretty witchy.
So what's the name of the first witch?
So I don't know, actually. I can't remember her name. So that's a great start. But I think it could be cool.
I am so about seeing, is this something you would actually think about doing? Because I think writing and directing the story of the first witch is, I mean, I'm done. I'm sold. I'm there.
Are you there?
I mean, there's only one of me and you'd need another million people, but.
Well, I think that's true. Okay, well, maybe we'll see what other people say. But I think there is a script in existence that I haven't read.
Huh.
But so maybe it's more plausible than we think.
Wow. Okay, so it's kind of maybe floating around out there.
Maybe. I think. Maybe. I heard about that years ago.
You might be possibly interested if it's out there.
If it's out there, send it my way. And I'll take a little look.
Okay. You're rep by UTA?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask a couple of kind of big movie things. Lee Pace. You have Lee Pace in this movie.
I know. I can't believe it.
Did you meet him through Guardians?
Yeah. So we were villains together.
Yeah.
And then I needed someone